Jazz was for ordinary people. Jazz is ordinary people. It's the music of the young. Every time young people invent music, everybody hates it.
J'aime beaucoup la danse. Une danse. Danse. Je trouve que la danse est une chose extraordinaire comme vie, comme rythme. Et c'est tout à fait, je trouve ça très bien et je vis dedans très, très facile.
Vous avez utilisé notamment le thème de la danse.
J'aime beaucoup.
Hi everyone. Just to make sure if you can hear me, can you give me a thumbs up in like the chat or something like that so I know that you guys can hear me? Or maybe react to me. Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much. Cool. Welcome to the fourth session of the Scholars Saturday sessions that we provide for you as the Strivers Network Sri Lanka. For all of those who are joining us through YouTube, thank you very much for being with us this evening. And we hope that these public sessions will be helping you as well on your application journeys to the United States. So a little intro about this particular topic. These are two things that are very out of your control, guys. I'm speaking to the scholars and people on YouTube. So it's very important that you, as applicants from Sri Lanka, put in the right amount of work way ahead of time so that these things can still, to a certain extent, remain in your control. All right? Cool. Just some general housekeeping things that we mentioned at the beginning of any session. This is being live streamed on a YouTube channel. So if a scholar decides to unmute yourself and ask a question, you will be recorded. And if you're comfortable with that, that's great. If you're not, you can wait till the Q&A session, which won't be recorded. And that's when the live stream will end and you can talk with me about your questions. Then in the meantime, you can type your questions on the chat box and we can discuss them when we get to the Q&A session. The Q&A session will not be recorded, and if anyone on YouTube has any questions to ask us for further information, please feel free to email us at thestriversnetwork@gmail.com. We mention this at every meeting, but the Strivers Network is an organization that changed my life and is changing many lives in Sri Lanka. Its mission is to serve high-achieving students from under-resourced backgrounds to achieve social mobility through education by providing mentorship and community as they aim for the world's leading universities. In the past 4 to 5 years where we've been active, we've been able to provide students with scholarships that range above over 4 million US dollars. And our students are going to the best universities in the world, like MIT, Princeton, Caltech, Harvard, Brown, Oxford, and many more. I will be hosting this session today. My name is Rithmika Karunadara. I am the pipeline manager for the year 2024-25. And I am an undergraduate at Bowdoin College, which is a small liberal arts college in the state of Maine. Right. So just a general overview of what we'll be covering today. I won't, if I'm rushing through at some point, feel free to like let me know on the chat. And I'll be attentive to that as much as I can. But I also don't want to make this a long meeting that takes up a lot of your time and really, it like bores you out. I'm not trying to do that. We'll be going through what recommendation letters are in the US application system. You'll be needing a few, and I'll be talking about the different things that you like, the different kinds of recommendations that you need. So we'll be talking about counselor recommendations, and that's a confusing term because we don't have that in our schools. So let's talk about that. The school profile is something that really it was a pain when I was doing it. So we'll talk about what the school profile is and how to create a school profile and the work that needs to go into that. Teacher recommendations can also be very complicated because this is a system that is which is very alien to a lot of our teachers. So we as students who are doing this application process need to do a lot of explaining to them and keeping them on board with us. So we're going to talk about how to do that. We're going to talk about what kind of teachers to ask, because just because a teacher is in your school and she's of a certain credential doesn't necessarily mean that she's going to help you. So we're going to talk about how to navigate those situations. Other recommendations is something that you can get if you really want another perspective to support your application. So we're going to talk about that as well. And then at the end of finally, we're going to talk about how to support recommenders, because this is a process that you need to get into early. And then the Q&A session won't be recorded. And then we'll talk about some scholars exclusive content in the program. Cool. Just another vibe check again. Can I have like a thumbs up reaction or something like that, just to make sure that folks are keeping up with me? Yep, lovely. Thank you very much. Cool. So introducing what letters of recommendation are, like sometimes we tend to underestimate how much these things are important to the application process, but the reality is that they are really important. And the reason that they're important is because these recommendation letters act as a way of validating a lot of the things that you've already said in your application. Again, like if I'm confusing you guys at some point, please feel free to speak to me and ask me questions on the chat, and I'll try and clarify those things on the go. But if it's something complicated and we need to discuss later, I'll put it on for later. Again, like you can put in all the information you want in your common application, but we need to verify these things from other people who've seen you in action. And this is kind of an opportunity for the admissions counselor to see and verify all the things that you've done, because it's coming from another person's perspective. It also kind of like, listen, like every avenue that you have to include information in your application is an opportunity for you to provide the admissions counselor with more information, with the admissions officer with more information about who you are as a person, and what kind of student you are. So you should use every one of these opportunities to your best advantage, which is why this is very important. Just wanted to put that out there. How many will you need? You will need 3 to 4, depending on your priorities, honestly. I recommend 4, but if you want to go to 5, that's something you can do as well. But you should also remember that certain schools have restrictions on how many recommendations that they require. Some schools only require 3, some schools only require 2. The compulsory ones are the ones presented by the guidance counselor and subject teachers. And again, we'll get into what a counselor figure is and how to approach subject teachers. And then the coach, mentor, instructor figure, that's optional. It's an additional letter of recommendation if you want to submit it. As a rule of thumb, we usually say, even when it says optional, do it, because you want to give them more information. And everyone's schooling experience is different, which is another thing that complicates what an optional additional like letter of recommendation looks like. So we'll talk about that when we get to that slide. Cool. So let's talk about a counselor recommendation letter. Counselors in the American school system, their job is to guide students through their academic, personal, and college career planning. What does this mean? Students who go to schools with guidance counselors will have regular meetings with their guidance counselors, and they'll go speak to their guidance counselors, and they'll tell them, look, like this is what I want to do with my life. This is where I want to go to college. Like, what should I do? And the guidance counselor is like, do these things, do these things, do these things. That's what a guidance counselor does. It's a big privilege to have, but it's something that none of us in the public school system have. Maybe some of us do, but obviously I don't think they're efficient, or they like I'm not. It's something I don't know a lot about to talk about. I can talk from the point of view where I never had one, and that's how I'm going to speak to you guys. So in the absence of a guidance counselor, who do we as Sri Lankan students approach? I've listed down the few options that are accessible, that I believe are available in most schools. And that's definitely a principal, a deputy principal, vice principal, assistant principal, or your sectional heads, because I'm speaking to A-level students. These are the significant figures who could count as a counselor figure. But here's the thing, the anything you can accomplish by talking, but these people are generally expected to know something about your life. It's very difficult for me to speak in abstract terms, so I'll speak about it in my application journey as well. When I was going to school, I was very involved in a lot of activities, and my principal knew me very well. because I was always out and about and I was always doing something. And like I would always come to his office with letters and things like that. So I had built a very good relationship with him. And that obviously played into my favor when I approached him for a recommendation, because he was like, yes, Puta, tell me all the information that you need. I'll get the person who writes his letters. Like he was like, we'll get it done, and it worked out well. But if you don't have that kind of a relationship, don't worry about it, because there is a way to work around that as well, and we'll talk about it. Um, but you need to understand that a counselor's recommendation and a teacher's recommendation and an optional recommendation, these three things are very different. And again, this common app system, US applications, these are things that are not familiar with our teachers and our principals and our administrators. So you have to do a lot of explaining. A counselor's role in the recommendation process is providing a very broad overview, which is in more specific terms, talking about what the student was like when they were going to school, what kind of activities did they do, how did their leadership impact other children, because this is something an administrative figure will see instead of a class teacher, because as class teachers only expected to see a student inside school, like inside the classroom, right? But a guidance counselor figure or principal, sectional head, like every time you go for a sporting activity or something like that, you have to get sectional head's approval to leave your classroom. I don't know if it's like that at every school. It was like that in my school. But regardless, like these figures are the people who are expected to, right? These people are the figures who are expected to know what you were like outside of your classroom, which is why you approach them as your counselor figures. Um, all right, just checking the chat to see if any questions. No, we're good. Um, these are some screenshots that I took from the recommenders guide on the Common App platform. Something I did because I applied when it was COVID, and I didn't really have the privilege of like being around my teachers and speaking to them, and my principal and all of that. I had to wait until he came to school to speak to him and whatnot. But like I took printouts of these documents, and I've put the source on the slideshow for you guys. I took printouts of these documents and I took them with me to go and speak to the principal, and I explained to the principal like this is what you need to do. Like the recommendation letter doesn't necessarily need to be like a book, but if it can be one, like if it can be like a very comprehensive one-page letter or a two-page letter that talks about you as a student, that's ideal. And these are the kind of things that they are expected to touch. And these are the kinds of things that you need to help your counselor figure, which is the principal, deputy principal, or sectional head, that you need to help them talk about these things in your application, right? All of you guys, I'm speaking as specific to the scholars on the meeting, like you guys are all exceptional students who like performed very well and highly in your schools. And the reason we've selected you guys to the scholars pipeline is because we see that. So obviously your application is something that is very important, not only for you, but also for the school, because it boosts the school's profile and whatnot. So when you are approaching your counselor figure, it could be your vice principal, it could be your sectional head, like please emphasize that, this is something that you're doing for your life, and that their support is very important to you, and give them all the tools they need to work on this, right? And we'll talk about this, gets more complicated into that, but we'll talk about it as we move on. School profile. Now, in an ideal world, like especially in the United States, like the school profile is a document that we as students will never get to see, right? But the thing is, we in Sri Lanka don't have school profiles because, again, we are not connected with the US education system. International schools will probably have school profiles because they have guidance counselors who are doing that job for them, but we don't have that. And it's kind of, it's in certain angles, it's unethical and wrong for us to be making a school profile. But this is what we have done, and we have passed down the school profiles year on year. If we have, especially within the strivers network, like if we've made a school profile for a specific school, we pass that down every year to create that continuum. And in a perfect world, like I tried to do this when I was in school, I tried to make the school profile and hand it over to my principal and kind of like legitimize the system, but things like that didn't work out. um but a school profile, if you don't know of a student from your school who applied to the United States before you, then this is a document that you need to make. If you know students from your school who apply to the United States, it's highly likely that they either had to make a school profile or they use someone else's school profile that they made for the school. The school profile isn't like a general document. It needs to be updated every year because the school profile needs to showcase like the academic results overview of your school, and we'll talk about what that is. Um, this is why the school profile is important. Again, the schools that people in this cohort especially go to are very different and diverse. We have some students who go to schools that are like supposedly prestigious in the Sri Lankan context, which I think is a fallacy of its own, and we'll talk about that another time. And there are schools that have websites, there are schools that don't have websites, and we as the Strivers Network, we have worked with all those cases. And it gets very complicated when it's like that. The school profile, however, like a recommendation document, is also a valid. It's a document that verifies this story that the U.S. admissions officer is getting. This student goes to school X in this part of Sri Lanka. School X may or may not have a website, but these are all the information and contact details of the officials in school X. So generally, like the school profile I made for my school, I had to include the school's contact information, school's address, school's pictures, and I had to like look for this information that the school profile is asking us, right? So this is a document that the counselor will upload. So you first go to the counselor and you tell them that I have to make this form of document. Again, depends on what kind of a relationship you have, because again, like I'm trying to speak in the in I went to school a while ago, so I don't know how much things have changed since I went to school. um but there are some principals whose office doors are always open. There are some principals who don't have their office doors open at all. So it's difficult to say that this is the amount of communication that you should have. But my advice to you is, if you don't know of anyone who applied from your school yet, you should start making this document now, because your first applications are due in November, and that is getting closer. And this is something that's going to take time, especially because there are certain information that you need to look for. And it's better to get this out of the way before your essay stress comes in, because essays are the most important part of the application process, at least what we've identified over 5 years of doing this. Um, so what are the components of a school profile? The school profile generally needs to talk about the vision and the mission of the school. It needs to describe what the school's community looks like. And what that generally means is schools are like, if I talk about my school, because that's the one thing I know, I mentioned in the school profile that students are admitted based on their geographical location, like, but then there's competitive admissions through scholarship examinations and GCE ordinary levels. And the school caters to this many students, and has this many active grades, and stuff like that is what we talked about. I also went to a religious school, so I talked about that aspect of it as well, and the kind of social demographics that existed within the school. But then again, it wasn't like the most comprehensive document. However, I included as much information as I could find. Um, some schools mention information about alumni. It's not necessarily important, and I don't think it necessarily helps the case. But if it's something that you can include, it's nice to include, because it also adds a sense of validity and status to the school profile. Um, in terms of curriculum, break it down. I went to a school that had a primary school and an upper school. There are some schools that have primary, middle, and upper schools as a part of the curriculum, and there are some schools that only, like, I don't know, like me, only have primary and upper schools, from primary from 1 to 5, 6 to 7, or some like stuff like that, 6 to 13, and things like that. So when you're breaking down the curriculum, you have to talk about, oh, in the primary school level, like, this is what children learn. In the upper school level, from grade 6 to 11, the children are preparing for their GC ordinary levels, and this is the kind of subjects that they have to follow. If you have English medium, Sinhala medium, Tamil medium, you mentioned that in the description of your school's curriculum. uh, in the last section, the A-level section, you talk about these are the streams that are available. These are the subjects that each stream has access to, etc., etc. So it's a breakdown of what the school offers in terms of an education. And if your school has a London's program by some chance, because there are some public schools that have that also, that is also a place where you can include that. And I will share some like models with you, like model school profiles, so you can see how it's done in the US. And when you are making it, use that as a reference in creating your school profile. Lastly, you need to and then also you can talk about the kind of extracurricular activities that are available at the school. Like, oh, we have 29 sports and 44 clubs and societies, and these are what the clubs and societies are. These are what the sports are. So that way, when you mention your clubs and societies and your sports in your common application, those get verified from the from the school report, because they're like, ah, okay, this kid is not lying to us. Like, these clubs exist in his school and are recognized by his school, right? Grading information is like, you guys know, our grading information is you need to get above 75 for an A, and then above 65 for a B, and above 50 for a C. That information breakdown, you usually like put a table for it, and talk about this is how students are evaluated. And then for academic results overview, you talk about the latest A-level class, like how many people got 3 A's, how many people sat for the exam from these sections, and how many students are like sitting for the A-level exam overall. Like, that statistic is what it is. And I'll share that at the end of the meeting, like a demo I have of the school profile I made. But a general example for what a school profile should look like, I've put a screenshot. Like, this is something I found online when I was making a school profile. I think this is like a general model. So ideally, you don't make it too long. Like, sometimes if you need to explain more, like, it's okay to go to 3 pages, but like 2 pages generally is what we try to stick to. In terms of how to create this document, my rule of thumb is always start early, because these things tend to become a pain if you don't start early. Refer as many other examples online. This is only one. I didn't have space to put others, but like, this is one I used when I was making my school report. Collect information related to the components mentioned below. So this is how you can be transparent about it when you are engaging in the process. Like, go and speak to your assistant principal, go and speak to your, if you have a coordinator of academics or academic affairs or something like that in your school. Not every school has that. Like, usually, like, it's one of the assistant principals who handles all academic affairs. But if, like, again, it depends on the school. So go to the school, go to the individual in your school who handles like academic information and things like that, and speak to them and gather this information. Like, your school should already have a mission vision statement. If it doesn't, don't worry about it too much. Like, I wouldn't say come up with something. Like, you can also just avoid it and like go straight into the school and the community. Like, I wouldn't encourage you to like make one of your own. Like, I don't do that. um um yeah. Consult school officials for information on academic results. As I told you, go and speak to the right people. Once you've made this, like, show it to your principal and tell them that you've made it, because it's important to be transparent in this process. Um, yeah. So this is what a school profile is. It's going to be a pain to make it, but it's something that you have to do if it doesn't already exist for your school. So, teacher recommendation letters. This gets a little complicated in the situation we're in right now, because what I'm hearing from your mentors and some of the people who've been working closely with you guys is you guys don't necessarily have a good relationship with your school teachers, and that is really complicating. And that is because like the Common App to is so structured around schools. And there's really like we don't know if it's okay to just ask a tuition master for a recommendation instead of a teacher. And that's something we're looking into, and we'll try and get back to you with verified information. Or if a mentor has already spoke to you about something, that's not something I'm aware of, or I don't know how to endorse that. What I have learned and where the extent of my knowledge is that you need to get recommendations from your school teachers. And these should be school teachers who you have worked with in your last 2 years of school, last 2 to 3 years of school. So ideally, your A-level teachers are the people who will be writing these recommendation letters. Why? What is the role of these recommendation letters? The role of these recommendation letters is really describing what kind of a student you are. Like, are you a student who is just silently staying in the class, or like doing like don't get that on the recommendation is also my advice, because like the recommendation needs to be strong, and it's very, if a recommendation is bad, it's going to cost you a lot in the application process. And generally, I don't think any of our scholars have put bad recommendations and got rejections. Like, that doesn't happen. But the recommendation letter from a teacher is an opportunity for you to get the teacher to describe what kind of a student you are in a classroom. Because again, like, you can apply it. I applied to 20 schools. I got into one. You can apply to 10 schools and you can get into five. It really depends on whether your attitude and the way you function fits the school culture that these American schools have created. And they really look into as much information as they can get, despite how exhausting it is, to determine if you really fit the vibe, as we would say it nowadays, of that school. So these recommendation letters are also a platform for them to acquire that information, because you're describing through, like, your teachers are describing how you behave in a classroom, what your academic curiosity looks like are you like asking questions, bringing things new into class, like that work ethic aspect is something that people like the official is looking for when they're reading these recommendation letters. um so this is what makes the teacher recommendation very different from the counselor recommendation, because the counselor can talk about all the extracurricular activities that you have done. You've done this, you've done that, but a teacher can talk about research projects and olympiads and things like that, if you've done that in as a part of your schooling career, because those are very academic honors and academic merits and prize giving and island ranks and all those things. These are things that you can talk about in your teacher recommendation letters, because they are directly related to your academic career. Cool. Just vibe check, give me a thumbs up if you're with me listening, and I don't know, just like with me so far. Right. Thank you very much. Lovely. Um, so this is again, I took a screenshot from the Common App resource for teachers on how to writing the recommendations. Like, you can look at it, like they need to touch on all these aspects of it, and you guys can help them do this, and I'll go into that when we talk about strategies. um but they need to talk about the kind of leadership you bring into the classroom. Like, again, I mean, in a Sri Lankan context, it would talk about like vice monitor, but in an American context, they're talking about whether you are like they're looking to see if the class is doing a group project. Like, are you taking the leadership? Like, are you the one driving the ideas and things like that? Like, if you guys are doing a debate in the class, like, are you talking or expressing yourself? Like, that's kind of what connotes leadership in the classroom. Academic achievement, obviously, if you are like always top of your class, like going to all these academic honors competitions and things like that, that's the kind of academic achievement that your teachers need to talk about. In terms of your growth over the course, like, I know in like maths and like science and like bio sections, like, you start your exams and you hardly have any marks, and then it's only over time that you guys get marks because it's that difficult. So that growth period and things like that, how you grow as a student, like, those are the kind of things that the teachers can talk about. The important factor that I think a lot of us don't consider, and like everyone on this on in our scholars network is very different, is this thing about resilience. Because like, not everyone has the privilege to be able to do extracurriculars and things like that. Like, some I don't know, but maybe some of you guys have had to work for your parents, like, business, to help your family make a living. You guys maybe like did a job part time because like you had to contribute to the family because your family was going through a lot. That's the kind of thing that we don't like, you can put it into your common app essay, you can put it into additional information, but this is another way to kind of talk about, oh my God, this is a student who has gone through this kind of adversity in order to accomplish their academic goals. Like, this is not a student who just came to school, like they like came to school, they got educated, like they went home, they took care of their like baby sister, baby brother, they worked in their father's shop or mother's business or something like that. These are information that can help them understand the kind of sacrifices and compromises that you had to go through if you did. Like, it's not something that everyone, I'm at least, yeah, it's if you did, you can put it into your application. And you can help your teacher put it there for you. Um, which teachers to ask? Again, it's another thing to think about, because I it's different from school to school, because some schools, like, you only have a limited number of teachers, so it ends up that you do end up finding the, like, knowing them well, so you speak to them. And the real struggle is if you haven't cultivated a relationship with these teachers, and we'll talk about that when we go to strategy. um, but just basic information, like, if you are thinking of STEM subjects, like as your major, if you're thinking of majoring in biochemistry, uh, like engineering related something, like physics, like you need to get a recommendation from a STEM teacher. If all your academic interests are STEM related, then both your recommendations can be from STEM teachers. If you are thinking about, also majoring in something in the humanities, like, I don't know if you'll be able to, because I know in the Sri Lanka's A-level structure, like, if you're an art student, you're an art student, commerce student, tech student, tech student. You don't really intermingle between the sections. So it's always like, even I just got the two teachers who I was taught from to write my recommendations for me. Um, but some American students strategize, and they're like, they get one recommendation from a STEM teacher and one recommendation from a humanities teacher. But I don't think that's something we can do. If you are one of those people who like put up a fight with your school and did combine maths, this, and also something like uh I don't know, like media or something like that, and you, or like business studies or something like that, while you were doing your physical science stream education, well, then you have a chance of doing that, but it's highly unlikely that that was the case for most of you. So you asked two teachers that you worked with in your last 2 years of school. Teachers who can really vouch for you, teachers who really like you would be the best option. Um, Teachers who know you well is a rule of thumb, but we'll talk about what happens if they don't. Um, Again, like, this is some advice that I found online, and I altered for the benefit of us. Uh, Sometimes there could be a teacher in your school who has the best credentials, like they went to, like, I don't know, Columbia University. They did really well. They're very popular. Everyone goes to their tuition class. Like, it could be there could be a teacher like that, but this teacher may be someone who hasn't really connected with you. She goes to your school, she has the credentials, and she's a great person. Like, she has, like, they have all of that. Like, he or she has all of that. Like, they've done they are the top of their class. They've done all of that. Um, but maybe he or she doesn't have a good relationship with you. Maybe he or she is just not very nice. That kind of a teacher would not be the right person to approach, because they won't do this job for you. So it's always better to go for a teacher who is more attentive to you, listening to you, has engaged with you, over the teacher who just has the credentials, right? um it's also nice to speak to a teacher who has seen what you do outside of the class too. Like, it doesn't need to be explicit in the recommendation, but it's good to just mention, I also saw this student go out to the class and do all these other things outside. Um, so the final tip, which is how you can help them work on these applications, is usually one thing that you can do is you can share your common app essay with them. You can share a list of achievements. You can share the kinds of things that you would like for them to talk about in a document and give it to them. Like, these are all information that they can read when they are going to write your recommendation for you, and really emphasize how important this recommendation is for your life. Because usually that's the best way to convince them to help you. So really talk about that, and give them all that information in document form. This is something that you have to do human to human. Like you can't do this over the phone. Like you have to go and meet with them. You have to go and sit down with them. If you want, you can buy them a cup of tea or something like that. I don't know. Like it's something that you need to go and do in person. I did it during COVID, so I had to phone call these people. Like I called them over the phone and I was like, hello madam, hello sir, this is Ritmaka. Like I'm doing this application thing and I really need your support. Um, I can share all the resources and information with you. Can you please write me a recommendation letter and I can support you in however you need, and you just need to go through that process. Um, the other recommendation letter, we're almost at the end, guys. Almost at the end. Bear with me. Other recommendation letter is if you worked with someone who is really cool. I think that's the best way to describe this person. Like, don't put another recommendation letter just because you want another recommendation letter. But here's the other thing, like for all the scholars in the Strivers network who are with us for this cohort, like we are going to give you guys a recommendation from your mentor. So your mentor is going to write you a recommendation letter, and that can be your other recommendation letter if you don't have a better other recommendation letter. Like I know that some of you guys have like done these big Olympiad competitions and you worked with those people who like are involved in the organizing of those competitions and things like that. Some of you volunteer for organizations outside of your school, and you get to work with people who are like really cool, who have done really cool things, who can vouch for you. So that is how I would frame another recommendation letter. Like for me, I worked in a I like I worked for a non-profit theater company while I was in Sri Lanka, and the director was a really cool guy. Like he's done a lot of things, he's done a lot of different jobs, and he also got educated abroad. So he wrote a recommendation for me because I've worked with him for like 10 years. um he's also an alum of my school. Um so that's how I would frame another recommendation letter. Someone who's really cool, who you have worked with closely. But if you don't have someone like that in your life, it's okay because the Strivers network is going to give you something too. Sorry for the folks who are watching on YouTube. Um, but again, like if you guys have any questions, like feel free to email us, and we will help you as much as we can. Yeah. How to support your recommenders. This is all about strategizing this process. Um, there's a video on the Common App webpage which we can watch, which talks about the portal, because this is like all of these recommendations, school profiles, transcripts, they are all uploaded through the recommend portal. And I feel like I should have maybe put a slide to talk about it, but I will walk you guys through the website and we'll talk about that. So we have to show them the video, or if they can't do it on your own, when you go to meet them, you ask them if it's okay for them to get their laptop and come and sit with you so that you can do it for them. In the sense, be like, okay, sir, miss, like, I'm going to send you the recommender email. And when you get the recommender email, you can click it and create your recommender account. And then this is where you have to upload all the documents, and you sit down with her or him after school, and then you do it. That's kind of what I did when I was applying. Like I spent a lot of time sitting with them, like especially my principal, because I didn't get to like speak with my subject teachers. Like my subject teachers, I had to like walk through them. I had to call them over the phone and walk through the process with them. But my principal, because I live very close to my school, I was able to go and see him and sit down with him and do this process. um so you need to sit down with them and show them how the portal works. And then again, if like when they're writing that recommendation letter, you need to give, we call, like in the US, people call it a brag sheet, which is where you talk about all your highest accomplishments and you describe the kind of things that you would like mentioned on a recommendation letter. Like in an ideal world, this is something that um this is something that the person who is writing the recommendation would ask you if they feel like, oh, they want to write you a good recommendation letter, but they don't have all the information. So it really depends. Like if you approach someone who really knows a lot about you, they might not need a brag sheet. But you can be like, sir, madam, like you can write the letter however you see fit, but I want to give you information that will help you to the best of your abilities to make sure that I get the most of this recommendation. But please feel free to like do it in your own way. Like this is just to support you if you need more information. And you can give them a brag sheet, which talks about all of your accomplishments and achievements. It's like a resume, or like a CV that kind of has all your achievements, and just some special information about the things that you would like to mention in your recommendation letter. I shared the PDFs that I got off the recommender guide from the Common App Recommender Guide. Like there's a PDF for what kind of contents that the counselor or the teacher needs to put in the recommendation, and then there's another PDF on how to write an effective recommendation letter. So I shared both of those PDFs with them, and I will go to the website and I'll show you how to do that right after this. Um, I would be prepared to invest some time into this. Either you put in 1 week and you're like, starting Monday, I'm gonna go to the school, sit with them and do this, or over the span of a month, you go to school at least once a week or twice a week, you sit down with them, remind them about this, help them, be very kind to them in the process. Like we can't be too demanding, even though we wish we could be sometimes. I'm sorry about that. It takes time, and this is a part of the process. If everything works out, the outcome is very rewarding. Um, if you come across a lot of issues doing this, um, you can always put your school officials in touch with one of us, ideally me, because I'm the program manager. So I can explain to them what the process is and kind of help support you a little bit as well. So that is something that you can do as well. Just reminding you guys, if you have any questions, to put them down in the chat, but we can talk about them in the Q&A session as well. So I think that's about it. But before I end this, I would like to show you guys the recommender guide website and the videos that you have to show them, and maybe we can watch one of the videos too. So let me quickly arrange that, and we can watch that video and call it a day. Can you guys see my screen? Give me a thumbs up if you see the Common App screen on. Yeah, thank you. So this is the recommender guide page on the Common App. And this is the video that talks about the first year recommender system. So we'll watch that. It's like 1 minute, and then you can show that to your recommenders as well. And this also gives you an overview of how to do this.
Recommenders play an essential role in helping students navigate.
Can you guys hear the sound? Give me a thumbs up to know. Thank you.
Recommenders play an essential role in helping students navigate the college application process. Common App makes it easy for counselors, teachers, and advisors to support their students by helping them manage the workflow associated with submitting letters of recommendation and providing insight into the progress of individual student applications. When a student invites you as a recommender in their Common App account, you'll receive an email with a link to create your account. Once you've created your account, you'll be able to see the status of each student that has added you as a recommender. Your student list gives you an immediate snapshot of your progress for each student. You can search and filter your student list based on a number of filters, including deadlines, form status, student progress, colleges, and graduation year. There is also a built-in to-do list that highlights upcoming deadlines and forms you need to submit. Getting an overview of your student's progress on their student page is quick and simple. Identifiers like the student's birthday and Common App ID help you make sure you're in the right place. You can view a breakdown of their Common App progress and the colleges they've added. Selecting a college lets you review your student's progress for that college. Students can also grant their counselors and advisors access to an in-progress PDF of their application. We know how important it is to keep yourself organized and your students on track. With Common App, you can now spend less time searching for requirements and processing documents, and more time focusing on the individual needs of each student. We know helping students submit their college application is only part of your job. That's why Common App is here to support you along the way. You can find help at any time by visiting commonapp.org/help.
Yeah, so with that, I think that brings an end to this session. Thank you so much to all those who are joining us on YouTube. This is when I'm gonna end the live stream. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at thestriversnetwork@gmail.com, and we'll make sure to support you as best as we can. Thank you so much. Scholars, please stay on the call to ask any questions and discuss things. Thank you very much.